We're live.
Hey, everybody, Capt Ron here for this week's episode of Fearless Flight Live. Welcome to all of you, especially anybody who might have a fear of flying or someone who may know someone who has a fear of flying, because the show is for you all. And just anybody that's interested in aviation and likes to hear Eric tell stories about flying. So anyway, and speaking of Eric, I got our crew's here intact. Well, we're missing a flight attendant, but she's getting ready to go back to work, so she's studying hard. But we got Dieter Staudinger and our resident first officer and Captain Larson, who is here solely to keep me in check from lying as much as I might want to. Right? We never let the story get in the way, the truth get in the way of a good story. So we kind of keep each other honest there. So anyway, let me share my screen real quick. I'll get it ready here. Action, what I'm doing. Okay. So, like I said, this is our weekly show that we talk about fear flying for people out there who are trying to overcome their fear. And we always like to make a shout out for our Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather private Facebook group. It's free, and it's a great place for you to dip your toes in the water if you have a little bit of anxiety about even looking for help. Only about 10% of the people that have a fear of flying will ever seek help, which is sad because it's the most successfully treated phobia out there. Might not seem like it, but it is. And so if you have a fear and you haven't joined, please do so. And if you run into somebody out there, encourage them to join as well. Tonight's show, I got just a couple of moments of reflection, and then we're going to have a special guest, John Eliav, who is, well, I'll wait and let John tell his story. But anyway, another success story, you know that, or he wouldn't be here. And then we had a question based on something that you'll understand why is this title, Fasten Your Seatbelts, Who Needs a Concorde When You've Got Mother Nature as Your Pilot? It was a headline in the news, and I had several of our followers contact me and say, oh my God, what should I do? And all that. And so we're going to talk about that. And we're going to remind you of the Clear for Takeoff 201 live monthly group coaching webinar coming up on March 21st, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And then, as always, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the on the Facebook page there, and Dieter will be scouring that as we go through the show this evening. So, okay, first thing, I don't think I could have done this last week. I was too close to home, but and you know, I wanted to just thank many of you who passed your condolences. You know that my little boy, or my little guy Rocco, oh, there it comes, passed a week ago Sunday. And I know I'm not the first one to lose a pet, but Jesus, it feels like it. And many of you have shared with me what, some of the stories that you've gone through too. And it just reminded me of how personal pain is. Because I don't reach that. I don't reach it, for flying like all of you do. And it is very personal, whether it's losing a pet or the terror that you feel with an upcoming flight. And so it reminded me of what it's like for you all to go through that. And because it's something that that a lot of the people around you do not appreciate. They just can't understand why you get so wrapped up about that. This is one of my favorite poses there, just one of the many moments that I shared with him, and all the joy that he brought into my life. And then I was just surfing through looking for things for this week, and I ran across this story. Now, this is an old story. In the early morning hours of September 5th, back in 1986, and for many of you, some of you weren't even born then. For those of us in the airline industry, we remember many of these incidents. Anyway, there was a Pan Am flight carrying 365 passengers from Pakistan to Germany, and it was hijacked by 4 Palestinian terrorists. And the hijackers boarded the airplane and demanded passage to Cyprus, as they did in those days. And it forced the crew to act quickly. And this gal was the senior air hostess. She was 22 years old. Her name was Nirja Banat, I believe is how I pronounce it. And she swiftly punched into the code for hijacking over the intercom and alerted the pilots. That gave them the notice and the time to escape. So they bailed out of the cockpit windows. And that was our strategy if we were on the ground, was to get the pilots out of the airplane so that now flying the airplane was no longer an issue. And it kept the airplane on the ground over the next 17 hours. And she not only did that, but she put her life on the line to save others again and again. Terrorists in those days were demanding passports of American passengers, presumably to single them out for execution. And they were all heavily armed, all four of these characters. And she hid the documents. She flushed some down the toilet. She hid some under the seat cushions and saved countless lives by doing that. And then when the ordeal came to a head, the hijackers began shooting indiscriminately into the aisles. She flung open the emergency door, allowed literally hundreds of passengers to jump to safety. And she stayed behind to shield 3 children from gunfire and was killed in the process. She's won many awards. There's a special piece on Wikipedia there. So, I just was in kind of a tender mood. And when I ran across this, I just thought it was worth sharing the level that some people will do to selflessly to protect others. And so just remember her quietly as well. Okay, I want to move on to our guest tonight. His name is John Eliav. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And he's joining us from San Diego. He's on a business trip, and he's going to tell us how he got there in just a second, and why this is such a special deal for him. So welcome, John. I so appreciate you coming on here. He and I talked yesterday, and he's in that phase where I'm pumping him for information because you guys don't believe me when I tell you can get over this, but maybe John can help you and say it's possible there. So welcome, John.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it is possible. It was one of those things, and my story, it resonates probably with a lot of the same stories that other people have. And 5 years ago, funny enough, I was flying back from Louisiana with my wife from our honeymoon, and I looked at her after having a panic attack, and I said, "I'm never flying again. I can't do this. Like, there's just, this is too much." I probably said some curse words at the same time. I know I did.
Was it mid flight, John, or was it before you?
Yeah. And the flight was super smooth. Like there was nothing wrong. It was just all in my head of like, there's something to happen right now. I'm waiting for it. Why isn't it happening? Here it comes. It's not coming. Okay, it's gonna happen now. It's gonna happen now. And so, yeah, I finally got to the point where I said enough is enough, and my work requires me to travel, and obviously I can't drive a car to Europe. And so driving to San Diego from Colorado is a 16-hour ordeal, and in the wintertime, the mountains through Colorado in the last week or two have probably gotten at least 6 to 8 feet of snow. And that's hard to drive through, and that's really dangerous. So I decided that I needed to take the step in the right direction, and that was to become a Fearless Flyer member.
And you live in Denver, so that's, unless you're going eastbound, it's a little bit better going eastbound sometimes. But when you're going westbound, particularly in this time of the year, and with snowstorms and stuff like that, it tends to be bumpier up there. And so, good for you. When we talked, you reminded me of just what you've done, how you've engaged with this, and that's what really got my attention. It's the people who do the best, the fastest, are the people who really kind of grab onto things like you did. And so, you want to share just what you did, as you're prepared? Because I think we first talked in November, maybe December. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, it was maybe December, late December, early January, probably somewhere around there.
Yeah, it wasn't long ago. And
No.
I tell people, if you give yourselves 30 days, you can do this, and you can make a difference. Yeah. So tell people how you did it, John.
So I started off with I joined the Facebook group. I looked into this before, and I remember seeing like the video of like you on the airplane in like Phoenix on YouTube, like maybe 10 years ago, and like somebody was interviewing you while you were on the plane, and I was like, dang, I don't live in Phoenix. I used to live in Phoenix a long time ago, but I was like, I don't live in
Yeah,
Phoenix, so how can I do this? Does DIA have something like this? And no, obviously they don't. And so then I got the harmonizer and some of the content there. I did the 101 online class with you and some other people. And then I felt like I wasn't giving myself enough resources to understand
yeah,
what my problem or how to fix my problem or to change the way that I think. And that's when I became, honestly, this doesn't, I mean, I don't want this to sound like an ad or anything, but I became a VIP member and I just completely immersed myself every day, at least an hour or so. I'm an IT manager for a global company, so I work in front of a computer all day, and I need some sort of like white noise. And it was the all the content. I did all the modules. I did a couple of them a couple times because they resonated with me and like the things that I was potentially worried about on a flight. And um, I've been watching these weekly live events and then all of the monthly ones on Thursday. I just sit there and listen and absorb the stuff that resonates with my fear and then help myself with, you know, rewiring my story. And something that we touched on yesterday was that, my problem is mechanics. Like I understand mechanics. I know things can happen. But just realizing like if something major needs to be replaced on an airplane, they take it for a test ride. They don't put all of us on the thing and then say, "Hey, let's see what happens with this thing," right? Or like the example I gave yesterday of if something's delayed, it could be simple as like the sink in the restroom. Like there's certain things that we tell ourselves when we're fearful of flying that I needed to change my story, and the modules helped me because they just put a lot of logic into it. And like planes are supposed to fly, and listening to the harmonizer continuously. I mean, I've been listening to it every night because I'm flying back home tomorrow. The planes bobs like cork on the river, like that. I understand that, and
yeah.
that makes sense to me more than like what my brain's trying to tell me.
Yeah. And you're a very technical person. That's your job. And and so, the nature of being a human being is to generate what ifs, first of all, especially when control is a factor, right? We want to know what if this happens, what if this, because we like to believe that we have some control over our destiny and our fate. And then when you have somebody, you make a living off of what if, right? Solving
Yeah,
what if problems for people. And
yeah,
so it's not surprising that once you get that mechanism going, when it doesn't matter what the content is, it just says, okay. And if you don't know the answer, we make it up. And
right.
and that's the unfortunate thing. And that's the elephant brain in us. It's intuitive, it's quick acting, and it doesn't necessarily get it right all the time, but it definitely believes it. And it may not be right, but it's never in doubt. I'll put it that way. So
Right.
anyway,
Ron,
yeah, go
we
ahead.
got a question here. John, Sharon wants to know what was your biggest fear, or what were or are your triggers, and how?
Sure. My biggest fear is that something's going to happen and I don't know anything about it, and then I find out too late. The biggest trigger that I had was after takeoff. I had had an experience where the generator went out on a plane after takeoff, about 1,000, 2,000 feet up, and we just floated. And to my mind, Captain Ron and I have had one-on-ones on this. In my mind, it was an eternity, but it was probably milliseconds, right? Because that's how systems are built. Um, but the lights went out and we floated, and then all of a sudden everything came back on and we kept going. But for me, that was my trigger. So my coping skills today, after doing the classes and the modules and all the stuff, and I'll be honest, I'm not perfect, right? Like I'm flying tomorrow at 7 a.m. and I'm nervous right now, but I know the tools that I have. But for me, I put the harmonizer on, 32 minutes later, we're already cruising.
Yeah.
And then I start writing with my left hand. I start listening to comedy stuff. I like race cars, so I'm downloading all the shows that I want to watch on Netflix, and I will just keep my mind occupied. And if something starts to creep its way in, I shut off what I'm doing. I write something down with my left hand about how I'm feeling, and I just blast that harmonizer. At least that's what I did on the way here, and that's what I'm telling myself I'm going to do on the way back home tomorrow. Is if that stuff starts to happen, do it. And I'll be honest, I'm not one of those. To some degree, I have to be a little bit outgoing. As a manager, I have to talk to a lot of people, and we're a decent sized organization. But when I did not talk to the captains, I didn't have that in me. But I did talk to the flight attendants, and they
Yeah.
were amazing. They were so thoughtful, and on descent they started talking to me about, one of them actually gave me a tissue because I did tear up.
Yeah.
No shame, but it was actually more tears of joy because I was so happy that I was doing it.
Yeah.
I didn't mention that when she gave me the tissue. I was just very thankful. And then when we were starting to descend, I started talking about Captain Ron and this program, and like it's been 5 years, and I the last time I flew, I yelled at my wife, like I'm never doing this ever again. I can't do this. And so even now talking about this, it's helped me. If I check my heart rate, I'm sure it's lowered because it just reiterates like the positivity of, we're talking about going to Europe, and we're talking about flying here, and we're talking about taking our 6-year-old on his first airplane, and he's super excited to go, and all these things that we can do
Yeah.
because dad doesn't have to drive.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
and dad will be rested when he gets there
yeah,
to launch out. That's great,
yeah,
and you need that for a 6-year-old. So, yeah, you mentioned one of the things when we were talking the other day. You talked about the necessity of continuous effort and engagement, and I know you
yeah.
you showed up. You showed up for the coaching classes
Yeah.
or the monthly coaching thing, and we're going to have another one on Thursday, which we'll highlight for everybody. And what's the value of that for you?
I think the value there is just to keep engaged and reiterate like this is something that doesn't just stop. I think you've said it a lot of times in your modules, and I've heard it in some other classes as well, of like, you know, if you want to do something, something not as simple, but as so ordinary every day of like someone saying, I want to lose some weight. Okay, then what are you going to do about it? You got to do something, and you can't
Yeah,
just do it and then say, okay, I'm done. It's one of those things where you have to continuously do it. And that's something I think I mentioned to you yesterday is, the modules have some videos from a year ago, and I'm still seeing some of the same people in the classes or in the
yeah,
monthly calls, because you do have to continuously do this. You do have to keep
yeah,
telling your brain, I don't want to wait. If I'm not flying for a year, everything that you did is completely gone. You know,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I said it with you, like piss poor planning equals piss poor results, and that's the message that
Right.
I took with this was, there was some nights my wife was like, "Are you still watching the video?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going on a flight in a week or two. Like I'm gonna continue to watch this because I'm absorbing something, even if I'm falling asleep to it. I'm still listening.
Yeah,
Constantly.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I say to people, whether it's the harmonizer or the videos, something like that, when you get so bored you want to strangle me, you're getting better for sure. You're
yeah,
not trying to seek that out. So, well, it's a lot of great information, John. I really appreciate you coming on once again. And I think what you've said, basically, the answer to your question is you have to do something different than what you did, have been doing before, and you have to have a plan to do something. And I mean, to me, what I've heard is you're living proof that it doesn't matter exactly what you do, but to do something and to plan to do something when the anxiety starts, or to get ahead of it. And I think that's why you've had so much success there. So anyway, other words of wisdom to anybody out there that otherwise might be able to intuit?
no, I think do the work and then spread the word, right? Because other people have the same problem. I have a friend whose aunt has walked off an airplane. I've never done that, and so I can only imagine how she feels. I'm sure I've
Sure.
heard a lot of other people have done that too. Like, I've spread the word of this class and the modules and the program, and even just the free. I mean, doing this once a week, just listening to people talk. You guys chattering before the call started, like you guys talk about airplanes, you're so into it. I think that's so cool, right? Like I can have certain conversations with people about like cars or whatever, and you guys have the same thing about airplanes because you have this affinity for this thing. And I think, you know, if I didn't have maybe a fear of flying, it would have been kind of cool to be a pilot because I like to go fast, and nothing goes as fast as an airplane. So
Yeah. Speaking of fast, I want to thank you, John, and
yeah,
invite you to stay with us. We're going to talk about going fast tonight
That was a
because
perfect lead in.
yeah,
yeah. I couldn't have set myself up any better than you did, John. That's perfect. Because in the story this week was a story, if I can get my slides up here, about traveling fast. Okay, come on, slide. Oops, I got the wrong thing there. Oh, here we go. Okay, come on. Okay.
And in the meantime, yeah, there we go. Perfect.
Okay. So there were numerous headlined articles and all over YouTube. They were saying record-breaking flight speed ? And the thing, I forget the exact headline, but it was like record-breaking storms push airplanes through the speed or past the speed of sound. And so I told Eric, I said, we're going to have to control ourselves tonight because there's so much bad information in this. Although, in fairness, one of the articles that I gleaned, they do talk about that and talk about there's no such thing as an airliner going supersonic, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But anyway, so here's the deal. Had this big, massive storm, which in part generated by a jet stream, and this is one of the YouTube videos. In just before this, he shows how it covered the entire northern tier of North America over there, and they had winds in jet stream up to 265 miles an hour, which is about 245 knots. We use nautical speed,
Wow.
and I remember one time I was coming from Seattle back to Denver, and we when you're going from west to east, and there's the winds are generally from the west blowing to the east, so you're always going to have a shorter ground speed going eastbound than you would over the same distance going westbound. And but if you have a jet stream, what we try to do, if you're going with the jet stream, you want to put your butt up in the jet stream so that you get that extra wind pushing you, and now you're going faster over the ground. And then if you're going back the other way, you definitely want to stay out of the jet stream because it slows you down in a similar fashion. And so all the headlines and the lead into this was making such a big deal. This speed is the ground speed. This is the speed at which the airplane is moving over the ground. It's not the speed at which the airplane is moving through the air. So I was going to ask Eric, so yeah, how safe is it to fly when you got all these high jet streams, Eric?
Well, you just explained it all, and we were struggling with self-control during the warm-up because this is just too much low-hanging fruit. But what you guys are concerned about is you're at point A and you're going to point B. And the speed at which you move over the ground between A and B is called the ground speed, and that's what that is. The airplane nominally cruises at the same airspeed all the time, and you can be lucky and have a tailwind like that, or not so lucky and have a headwind. And the headwind, obviously, it's going to take longer to go to A and B, and with a tailwind, it's going to take much less time. So flight planning revolves around that. We know what that stuff is. Those forecasts are accurate. We know what the fuel load needs to be and the timing. But if I was those guys, if I was the captain, I would have who's ever in the right seat sending company communications constantly to Lisbon to tell the gate, no, really, we're not kidding. We're going to be there 2 hours and 40 minutes early. That's 2 hours and 40 minutes. Do you understand that? Here's your time, because the gate people are not going to be anticipating an airplane to show up that wildly far in ahead of schedule. And hopefully those guys got a gate and all the passengers could get off and didn't have to spend a considerable amount of time parked on the ramp waiting for an available gate.
And speaking of that brings up a routine issue that many of you will experience. If you go back to the year that they passed the Airline Deregulation Act was 1978. That was my first year in the airlines. And between then and now, there's roughly twice as many airplanes in the air. Okay, and that don't get all crazy about that means too many in a small container. No, but there's a lot more traffic now. And so in the days when I was getting started, you didn't have that kind of traffic. You had, if the airline had 70% average load factors, that was considered full occupancy. That's how we staffed it. That's how we figured out how many rampers they have, how many mechanics they have, how many flight attendants and all that. And now we consider 90 to 95% is full occupancy. And so what that means, and plus the number of airplanes out there, so you can, as Eric said, the good news is you get to your gate an hour early or get to your destination an hour early. The bad news is you sit out on the ramp, and some of you have experienced that. And for some of you, you don't celebrate the fact that you're there early. What you do is bemoan the fact that you're got to sit there, and then your claustrophobia starts kicking in, and you think, I got to get out of this airplane and all that, and you ain't going anywhere. You're going to sit out there and wait till a gate opens up for you. So the thing about it is, they make a big deal out of the speed at which the airplanes are getting there over the ground speed, but it's another question here. It says, when do we receive special training for handling flights in extreme wind conditions, Eric? I mean, do we care what the jet stream is? No. And it says, when flying in such high wind speeds, or will that increase turbulence, and how do airplanes handle it? Well, we talk about turbulence till we're blue in the face, but can there be turbulence?
Sure, the jet stream is moving much faster than the surrounding air. So that shear or boundary area between the jet stream and the other air there will be turbulence associated with that, like a running rapid. So hopefully the airplane can be either have itself completely in the, as we call it, the core of the jet, not in the boundary area, or if it's flying against the jet stream, way away from it, to stay out of the winds and stay out of that boundary area and minimize turbulence on the ride, no matter which way they're going.
Yeah. And let's just touch, Eric, on the implications of an airplane flying fast, okay? And supersonic. They mentioned supersonic. I happen to have been lucky enough to fly an airplane supersonic in my career when I was in the Air Force learning how to fly. And what that it does, it's barely noticeable in the cockpit when you actually break the sound barrier. There are some very subtle things that you notice. One of them is on the airplane I was flying, the altimeter reverses momentarily. Another one is you notice that the outside noise disappears, because now you are literally outrunning the sound that you're generating behind. But that doesn't happen to an airliner. We have a limiting speed on that. They're not designed to do that. Matter of fact, we keep the airplane purposely away from the maximum speed, and we can only get to the maximum speed if we were in a dive. And that's part of our training, is to recognize the limitations of the airplane when you get going, if you were to enter a dive like that, just how to keep it slowed down and all that. But there's nothing about going, an airliner is not going to go supersonic. And anything to add to that, Eric?
Well, just as you pointed out, if you can find a picture of your old airplane with you standing on it, we can see a picture. The wing design of a supersonic airplane, generally a fighter, is quite a bit different from the way a wing looks on an airliner, and both of them are designed to do what they do well. And the shape of the wing on the airliner will not allow flight through the sound barrier. And we generally cruise. We always reference our cruise speed when we get above 28,000 feet. There's a crossover between indicated airspeed and knots and fraction of Mach, or the speed of sound. and we generally would cruise at long range cruise at somewhere between 0.79 or 0.8 of the speed of sound, and that's clearly displayed on our airspeed indicator, plus the limits and that kind of thing. And when you exceed that speed and get up close to it, not only is it the ride becomes rough and bumpy, and the drag on the airplane increases tremendously. So your fuel burn goes way up for a very small increase in speed. So the pilots don't lash the airplanes like that because of the ride and the way we burn the gas. But if Ron can find a picture of him on his fighter,
Yeah, let's see. Okay.
This is good enough. There we go. You can see
Yeah.
that's quite a bit different from the average airliner that you get on.
And that's why, and it's every element of the design is addressing the fact that they want this airplane to go faster than the speed of sound. And so the laws of aerodynamics change as you go through that barrier. And that's why when Chuck Yeager who was the first human being to fly an airplane faster than the speed of sound in 1947, it was designed to do that, and it was designed to acknowledge a change in aerodynamics about that. But the whole thing with the hype with the headlines that look out because we're flying faster than the speed of sound. It just doesn't. They're talking about how fast you fly over the ground, and not literally not anything related to that. So. Okay, let's see. And of course, it brings up the thing about climate change, and that may be related to climate change, the higher jets. But like I said, I remember it was back in, oh my God, it was about 1985, and I was flying from Seattle to Denver, and we went through an area. We had the jet stream behind us, smooth as glass, and we were doing. The velocity of the jet we were in was 245 knots. It was exactly what they put on that slide there, and it's great because we are scooting across the ground, but doesn't matter. The only time it would be an issue is if somebody raised the field elevation to 40,000 feet and you had to land at that speed, but we don't do that. I mean, it's ridiculous. So anyway, okay, let me go back to the slides here. And
so the one question that came up is, what is the top speed of a commercial airliner? And I would imagine different planes have.
And Eric was just talking about that. So do it again, Eric.
So the top speed will depend on the weight and the temperature and the altitude where it is located. And there's what we call a barber pole, because it's a red and white slashed indicator on the airspeed indicator showing that the maximum speed moves, and it will always point on our analog indicator to the maximum speed the airplane can be operated at. Or on the new glass cockpits and fancy things, there'll be we call a speed tape, a vertical display, and it'll show the maximum speed. But generally, on one of my old airplanes, it was 0.865 Mach, and generally it's somewhere in there, 0.86 to 0.9 of the index of the speed of sound at that temperature and altitude, which is a variable thing. That's why that moves. But that's generally the top end that the airplane is allowed to be operated at, speed it's allowed to be operated at.
And you mentioned the term glass cockpit. What does that mean, a glass cockpit?
When I talk about that, that's what all the new kids and all the new generation stuff with electronic flight instrument displays. So there are multiple TV screens with different ways of displaying things, and the airspeed is displayed on one of those screens, as well as our old round dial airspeed indicator with a pointer on it. So we old guys refer to those as the steam gauges, as opposed to the electronic flight display gauges, which we call the glass. That's the glass part of the cockpit, and then we got the steam part of the cockpit, but we have them both in there with their own way of things.
Yeah, it's just a modern airplane there. So, okay. So I think I'm showing the
Yeah.
highlights. Okay. So we want to mention before we cut away tonight, we want to mention and we want to thank John for giving us a little pitch here that this is where you seriously want to be. If you have no idea otherwise what to do, join our monthly coaching calls. It's the third Thursday of every month. This month it's going to be March 21st, and we're going to talk about. We always have a little bit of psychoeducation on that, and then we dedicate some part of it to some guided visualizations, and we dedicate the rest to interacting with the people who show up and are there for the live coaching. But this month we're going to talk about, how do you know you're getting better at overcoming your fear of flying? I mean, that's a question a lot of people ask me. And in the future, John gave me an idea. He said, maybe you could talk about what's a maintenance test flight? What are some of how do I know when I'm operating, or when I'm on an airplane and they've done major maintenance on that? How do I know why it's safe to fly and all that? But the topic for this month is you've been doing this, you've been doing it, and you don't feel like you're getting better. That's one of the things that people have the biggest time getting their confidence up to get on the airplane, particularly if they've ever gotten off the airplane or if it's been a while since they've flown. They want to know, can I trust myself to get on there and be able to manage my anxiety? And the answer is yes. And John has given us firsthand amazing testimonial that yes, and you won't get rid of all the anxiety, or at least it's highly unlikely that you will, but it's not about that. It's about feeling confident that even though you'll have some anxiety, you're going to start with it much lower. It's going to give you some room for resilience if you get a couple of triggers that go off there, and you're going to be able to feel like you can cap it and it won't go out of control. So you just got to do it. And the people who get over it are the ones like John who get after it and persevere and never give up. If you do it, you can fly, and you can fly not just to bare minimum, but you can get to where you feel comfortable, and you start to notice that you're not thinking about the airplane anymore. And that's really where all of you want to be. So, okay. Any other questions, Dieter, or words out there?
I just also want to point out one of the things, if you have not been part or have never heard of our Fearless Flyer Club, that is also an amazing way to stay connected, because not only do you get the monthly group coaching calls for free as part of being in the Fearless Flyer Club, but we are actually putting at least one, usually two meditations in their guided visualizations for you with music. We're really making this like a meditation guided visualization library, and I think there's over 20 already now that you have to choose from, and we're talking about different aspects of your flights as well, or your fear. So they're definitely worth a listen, and some of them also you can watch as a video as well. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
Any of you in the helping profession, any of you in the legal profession, any of you that might be pilots out there who are sandbagging, any of you that do professional training, you know that you have to do recurring training. You have to keep your skills up. And the Fearless Flyer Club is recurrent training for fear flying. In no other words. That's exactly what we do. So I'm with Dieter. I highly recommend that. And that's why I said, if you have nowhere else, no other idea what to do, that would be the place that I would start and would dip my toes in the water doing that. And you won't regret it. And now we're thanks to Dieter and Eric and Diane they're doing the crew edition of Fearless Flight once a month. It gives me a little bit more time. Now I'm starting to do some other things along the lines of visualization. So some of the people now I've been able to do a visualization for the coaching sessions, the 60-minute coaching session. So we got new stuff that we've been promising for years, but we're finally getting to that. And so we welcome you to come, and if you haven't done it before, consider doing a 15-minute coaching session. It's free and it's a great place to start and figure out what is the next step for you. So, okay, thanks to everybody. Thanks to John again. If you're still listening, John, thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing your experience. It's immeasurable how much value that is to people out there, because they just don't believe us when we say you can do this. And I don't blame you, but it's incredible to have somebody come on and tell the story that you did and where you're at and demonstrate how active and aggressive you were in going after this. I mean, literally in a month, you're in the air and you're doing great, and the courage to continue to do that. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story, and look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Have
Eric.
a good trip tomorrow, John.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to one thing, because it almost kind of like John mentioned so many great things, but I want to have a shout out to Gary, to Shali, to Marsha, like all of you who are watching. I mean, this is, staying current and tuning in.
Yeah, we should publish the list if you want to figure out how to do it. Watch these people that are here all the time. Those are the people that are blazing the trail out there for you.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody, and thanks to all of you for watching. We appreciate it. We enjoy the questions from you. Keep them coming, and come back next week for another edition of Fearless Flight Live. We'll see you, everybody. Have a great week.